It's an exciting time for the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice as we look forward and prepare for our 2019 conference later this year. One of the challenges we face is the determination to remove the freedom and rights of individuals to move away from unwanted sexual identities and practices. And once again, the uncritical idea that so-called sexual orientation is fixed and unalterable is being trumpeted as the bedrock of sexual politics in many Western democracies. The current release of the film Boy Erased in some European cities is based on the autobiography of Gerard Conley, starring Lucas Hedges, Nicole Kidman and Russell Crowe, and helps us to affirm the reason for the existence of the IFTCC. There are lessons to be learnt about how to support those wanting to come out of homosexual practices and the ethical standards that must be in place and adhered to for those involved in supporting them to do so. The IFTCC is here to offer training and support for those involved in such work to build accountable and ethical practices in both counselling and pastoral ministry for those unwilling to embrace homosexual and gender confusions. Whilst we have concerns that the film disregards what Conley's autobiography plainly reveals as a disordered family of origin with its distorted religious practices and even his own sexual molestation, there are clear lessons for all of us to learn about the questionable practices of ministry initiatives revealed in both the book and the film. But none of this changes the IFTCC's right to exist and its mission to protect the rights and freedoms of those wanting to help others to move away from unwanted homosexual and gender patternings. And there is a role for professional and pastoral support to achieve the client goal of changing behaviours and replacing unhealthy emotional patterns with healthy connections, and we can be grateful for those able to offer such help. Dr. Quinton van Meter and Professor Carolyn Peeler are two such professionals who have significantly contributed to the IFTCC in the past year through both their expertise and experience.
Professor Carolyn Peeler, it's great to have you in Europe. Tell us what you're doing here.
I am going to present on narrative therapy, specifically working with women with same-sex attraction distress.
Now, I'm not sure that viewers will understand what narrative therapy is. Just in a nutshell, tell us what it's about.
It is a different approach, a more postmodern approach, in which the therapist gets out of the center of the process and puts the client in the center. Some of the key aspects or philosophies are really that the client has the agenda. There's the self-determination of the client, the autonomy of the client is key. And so what we do is we try to find out what their agenda is and kind of extricate them from the cultural agenda that may not be working for them.
So is that the role of the therapist?
The role of the therapist is to act as a scaffolding for the client while they reclaim the story about themselves.
And is this a methodology or a modality that is practiced internationally?
Yes, it is. Maybe not as much in the States, actually, as it is in the Middle East. I think Israel, we have a group there, but Australia is where it came from. New Zealand, there are people practicing it in the U.S. and all over the world, but it probably is not as popular there.
So, I mean, is it some exotic way of doing therapy? How would you kind of put it in the family of therapies?
It came from marriage and family therapy originally, working with families who were experiencing distress related to the dominant cultural narrative about who they are. And so that's its roots, is in family therapy.
And your involvement in it, you're a therapist, but you're also a professor in a Christian university. Just tell us something about your particular role in all of that.
Sure. I'm a professor and an assistant dean and head of the School of Arts, Sciences, and Humanities at Arizona Christian University. And we do all undergrad programs there, but we have a family studies program where we introduce these ideas to students who may be wanting to go ahead and receive a master's degree in marriage and family therapy.
Well, it's so good to have you. Thank you so much for coming. Anything you want to tell people in Europe?
Thank you for welcoming this international group to come and learn together and support each other. And Europe is a beautiful place at all times of year, and it's a welcoming and warm place, and I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for speaking to us tonight. Dr. Quinten van Meter, it's always a pleasure to meet you. We saw you in London recently, but you're here in Europe. Tell us why you are prepared to give us the time that you do.
Well, I'm particularly interested and distressed by the constant drumbeat of transgender affirmation as a means to treat children who have transgender confusion. And so as a pediatric endocrinologist who practices in the United States, having watched the history of this process over the past 30 plus years, I was trained at a time when the movement was then called transsexualism, and it was a bothersome problem then, and it was folded in and put away as an abject failure and hopefully never to be reopened again. And what we have now in the United States is as many as 55 transgender clinics for children at established university centers. Previously, this whole concept was started at Johns Hopkins University in the 70s, and when it failed utterly, it was put away. But it is now reopened, and it's being widely accepted in the United States in the professional organizations. And what I've tried to do here for the folks that are attending this European conference is to explain to them the roots of this, the history of it, so that they can put into perspective how a few key individuals, set the seeds in the ground like a mustard seed, and what we have is a very giant plant that is flourishing to the detriment of children. So in my role as the president of the American College of Pediatricians, our whole organization bases its philosophies and recommendations on what is truly best for children in the absence of the political agenda of the parents or the adults in the environment.
Now, I'm sensing from my colleagues that the particular skills of a pediatric endocrinologist are important in this whole debate. Why is that for those of us who are not perhaps skilled in the medical terminology? What is the role of endocrinology in this particular debate?
Well, the role in endocrinology should be no intervention with hormones. Endocrinology is the study of hormones and their biologic action in human subjects. And what's turned into, from a problem of being a state of mind, which it truly is, has been medicalized and turned into a problem with actually no biologic basis, but looking at biologically based treatments. So my role as an endocrinologist is to convince the folks in my colleagues in the United States and the world, if possible, that this is not an endocrine issue, that it needs to be dealt with as it has been successfully dealt with for over 30 years, with intense counseling and reaffirming for that child, finding what drove them to use transgenderism as an escape mechanism from childhood trauma.
Could you say something about the research that I believe tells us that if you leave this issue alone, it appears to self-correct? Is that an accurate way of talking about it?
It is a dramatic truth that is known, and actually initially in the transgender affirming community was essentially mentioned right up front, and before they would then go on to the affirmation pathway, is that 98% of boys and 88% of girls, as they pass naturally through puberty without any affirmation and with counseling or with what they call watchful waiting, as the child on their own and with the family's help begins to realize that this was a mechanism that is not real and not healthy and would not solve their problems. So if you've got that degree of cure rate, if you want to think of it, of a gender dysphoric child that does not involve hormones and surgery, and which comes out with a positive outcome, there is absolutely no reason to do research to look at another pathway which we know from the background of the treatments has a lot of incredible permanent side effects that in the studies from Europe, patients who've done this for their lifetime, they come out in worse psychological shape than they were before they went in.
Now, is your perspective that of an academic, or are you involved from a practice point of view?
Well, I am a private practitioner, but I have affiliations with 2 medical universities in Atlanta, Georgia, and I keep in touch with the medical research and have colleagues who are in that field for a living. So I do not do any clinical studies as such, so I'm really not an academician. I would publish a conglomeration of what I have reviewed in the literature and from my own personal experience with transgendered patients. But I am not somebody who is at the bench, if you will, or doing studies, longitudinal studies of the benefits or detriment of affirmation therapy.
I guess what I was asking also was, are you involved with children who would have this issue?
Yes, I am. They come to my clinical practice. Because I am known as someone who does not believe in medical and surgical intervention as a pathway to success, that somewhat self-refers the parents who feel that way coming in. There's a large internet network that exists for patients to go on, and I'm obviously on the list of somebody that does not affirm. And if, in that case, somebody who wishes to have affirmation and nothing else is not likely to show up in my clinic.
Now, it seems to me we don't hear about doctors who are coming from your point of view very much, but I guess what you're saying is that there are individuals who would support your point of view.
Yes, and they are in academia. The problem is that they have to remain silent to protect their own jobs. The classic example of Dr. Kenneth Zucker, who is an affirmation specialist, if you will, who designed the whole concept of this kind of therapy and showed its success in his published research. He was removed from his position at the university, and his clinic was shuttered, and he was called all sorts of slanderous names and libelous things said about him. We learned earlier yesterday that the Canadian government settled a lawsuit in his favor and had to essentially undo the slanderous things they did, and they paid him a handsome sum of money, which doesn't really repair all the damage, but it gives people with convictions courage perhaps to step up and not be afraid of academia, power, and the politics of academic medicine.
We look forward to hearing more in your presentation, Dr. Quinton van Meter. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
One of the most exciting Core Issues Trust Voices of the Silence projects of late has been the filming of Once Gay, Matthew and Friends, widely released to celebrate the freedoms the IFTCC wants to encourage, protect and support. We're grateful for the young voices such as that of Matthew Grech and his friends from Malta. You'll find the free-to-view Once Gay, Matthew and Friends on voicesofthesilence.com website, and I hope you enjoy their music as much as I do. On behalf of the IFTCC Executive and Planning Groups, I'd like to encourage you to continue supporting those who want to leave what they have found to be unhelpful and unfulfilling practices, and to value those who stand with them in their journey. More than ever, we need to learn from past mistakes and to strive for the highest standards of practice that truly reflect the Judeo-Christian values that underscore our lives, beliefs, and professional practices. Let's build a future with our international partners together. Please support the IFTCC's mission, and don't forget to visit iftcc.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and Twitter. Thanks for watching.